Good morning, Grant Wesleyan Church. My name is Matt Clark. I'll be the one doing the message this week. I hope this video recording finds you doing well. This is just a pre-recording of the message for those that aren't able to watch the live stream. This is the same message I plan on doing during the live stream on Sunday. We will still be having that as we have for the last couple months. We're going through a message series on holiness for ordinary people. This is the third message in a 4-part series. The first message was on scary verses, and the second one was on what holiness looks like. And this week we're doing on why holiness matters. If you haven't watched the other two, I recommend going back and watching those before you watch this one, so that way you're caught up and you understand what's going on. So in week 1, Jeff used the passage 1 Peter 1:13 through 16, and it says, "So prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Put all your hopes in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. So you must live as God's obedient children. Don't slip back into your old ways of living to satisfy your own desires. You didn't know any better then, but now you must be holy in everything you do. Just as God who chose you is holy, for the scriptures say, you must be holy because I am holy." Now the last part right there, the "you must be holy because I am holy," that actually comes from 3 different spots in the book of Leviticus. I could just end the message right there and tell you that holiness matters because it's a commandment from God. He says it multiple times throughout the Bible, but let's dig a little bit deeper into that. God said to be holy. Now for me, as I was growing up, holy was kind of a scary word. It was intimidating. The first thing I would think of when I heard the word holy when I was sitting in church was a pastor, the Sunday school teacher, or the older people that were at church every Sunday. As I kept going to church, then it started changing into like the massively religious people, as I would say, like the Billy Grahams, Mother Teresa's, going to youth events, the speakers at all these giant youth events, or even Christian bands that would see live concerts. But me, myself, I didn't think of that because I knew my own thoughts, and they weren't pure all the time. I knew my own actions, and what I said and what I did, they weren't always the best. But what I want to do as we go forward is I want to give you a little bit more meaning and context to the word holy. So the word holy comes from the Greek word hagios, and besides holy, this word means to be pure. It means to be set apart. It literally means to be different. Or in our society, you might say the word weird, because usually when things are different, people call it weird. God says to be holy because I am holy. God says that in this very impure world, you're to be pure. God says to be set apart, you're not normal. You're going to be different. God says don't be like the rest of the world, but be different. And the whole time I was reading that, it just reminds me of what Jesus said in Matthew 7:13 through 14. It says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." There's also a song by Newsboys that they said, if you go with the flow will drown you. It's kind of the same thing there. And the key to this is, for those that are seriously following Christ, where you're not just a Christian in name, but you truly want to give honor to God in the way you live, when you follow his teachings, Jesus is going to lead you off the broad path and onto the narrow one. And your goal is going to be please God. And when you're striving to please God, he's going to set you apart. You're going to be different. And the rest of the world will call you different, or even call you weird. And the moment you leave that path, you might be smacked in the face with people who are going to make fun of you. Because they're going to say, hey, that's not what normal people do. Why are you being different? Why are you so weird? Why do you do that? Why don't you just be like everybody else? And you're going to hit with this pressure to conform to the norm. This kind of happened to me when I turned my life back around and started following God, and I quit drinking. I went through a situation. So when you leave the broad road and you follow Christ on the narrow road, people may mock you. They may call you weird, but remember this: when God leads you in that way, whatever you do, don't get stuck in the bucket. Now, some of you are going to say, what in the world does that mean? Now during Sunday service, I'm going to be showing a video, and it talks about the crab mentality. And if you don't know what the crab mentality is, it pretty much just means if you get a bunch of crabs and you put them in a bucket, what happens is if you put one crab in there, it'll eventually figure out how to get out of that bucket. But if you put a bunch in there and one crab wants to leave, the other crabs will grab it and bring it back down, and they'll never be able to leave. They all stop and they all stay in the bucket. And you may ask, well, why do people do that? Because there's comfort in the crowd. It's easier to stay in a group, it's easier to stay in a thing and not be out there by yourself. And then some of you, you're going to be growing in your passion for Christ. You really want to please Him. His Word is making you different. You're set apart. But you're going to have to, for the rest of your life, deal with that constant pressure to conform to the norm. It's going to be really hard to just sit there and be different from everybody else. Because it's a lot easier to not be part of the group. Or to be part of the group and not be by yourself. All your life there's going to be that gravitational pull. It pulls you back to the cultural norm. You're going to have to fight the drive to conform to the norm. Now there's two different types of pressure you're going to deal with as you go through this. The first one is an inward pressure. The second is an outward. Because we have two different pressures we deal with. But we're going to start with the inward pressure. The inward pressure is something that most of us deal with. I know I do. And that is the need to please. The need to make everybody happy. We want to make other people happy. I can say from this, my wife has this issue a lot of times. Because I can ask her certain questions like, hey, where do you want to go to eat? Or what kind of food do you want? And her first response, instead of being like, I'd like to go to blank, or I'd like this for dinner, her first response most of the time is, well, what do you want? And then I go, no, I asked you. And she says, well, I'm just trying to make you happy. So we go through this. So we don't want to think we are different. We want them to like us. We want to blend in. We want to be normal. To be honest, the need to please has been one of the biggest obstacles in my own life when I'm truly serving God. Whenever I feel like God is leading me to do something, the very first thought that drops into my head is, well, what are people going to think? I mean, what are my friends? What are my family going to say? Well, is this different? This is kind of different. Are they going to make fun of me for it? Are they going to understand? And what are people going to think? The big thing is there, as we start making decisions and start following God, we have to deal with that struggle. We have to go over things. We have to think things. And so many times we get put in that position where, it's kind of hard because you're so used to doing what everybody else does. But the Bible gives us a direction on what to do. In Proverbs 29:25, it tells us what we should do. And it says, fearing people is a dangerous trap, but trusting the Lord means safety. Now that's the New Living Translation version. In the NIV, the version says that the fear of man is a snare. And the way that version is laid out, and the way it's translated is, the word snare literally means a hook that was put into an animal's nose. The first thing I think of when I think of a hook in an animal's nose is I think of a big bull. You think of that big bull that's got the big hook in the nose. Well, the reason that hook is there is because they'll tie a string to it and everything. And that bull will outweigh the person dragging it by thousands of pounds. But the reason why they can yank that around is because they have that snare in the nose. And I looked online, and there's a nerve connected to that nose point. So if they don't follow where that hook or that snare is dragging them, that bull is going to be in pain, and that bull is not going to be happy. So what's going to happen is, when you put that, think of it like that, because you pretty much are just putting a snare or a nose in your own thing. And the fear of man will prove to be a hook. It will hook you just like that bull. So you're going to be dragged all over the place and just put wherever they want. So what that might mean, God might lead you to turn off the television, not watch TV or the news because of all the negativity going on, because of what it's doing to your attitudes or what it's doing to your thoughts and how you're worried about everything. Maybe He just wants you to take a break from TV for a while. But the first question you might ask is, well, what am I going to talk about when I go to work? Or when people are asking me, have you seen what was on the news? And you say, well, I just quit watching the news for a while. You're going to have that question. Or God might lead some of us to dress modestly, or to change the way we dress. I know for the longest time, I used to dress with clothes that were all black and they had skulls on them, and I thought they were cool growing up. But I got rid of all those clothes because it's like you're supposed to be setting an example. And then it could be like for women, it could be for modesty because there's so many things we don't want to do that. And just think about it. You want to dress modestly, but then you're wondering, what are people going to think if you show up at the beach in a one-piece bathing suit and everybody else is in a two-piece? There's things like that. I will say for me, there was 3 big things. 2 of them kind of tie together, and those are movies and TV. There were 2 big things like that I needed to change. For television and movies, I had to start looking at why movies and why television things were rated a certain way they were. Because I was fine with the blood and violence, but what would happen is if I'd watch a movie that was crude or had a lot of language, well then I would go back to that old way of talking because, well, I just watched it, so it was fine, and it did that little hook on me. And I don't want to struggle with pornography, so I wanted to stop watching movies that had nudity or a bunch of sex scenes in them. So if that stuff was in those movies, I quit watching them. And there's plenty of movies that people say, oh, you should watch this. And I won't watch them just because of what's in them. The other one that was big to me was the music I listened to. For the longest time growing up, now yeah, I grew up in the 90s and the late 90s and the early 2000s. So I went through like the Eminem and all that stage and everything. So I listened to that music when I was in high school. But now I listen to those songs and I listen to what's in them. And I started thinking, man, that's terrible. And I just won't listen to that stuff anymore because all it does is it just rots in your brain and does that. Now people may say, well, it's just music or it's just TV. But for me, I just don't do that stuff because it's what God told me to do. And I've been called weird because I don't listen to that. And I've been all this other stuff. So, now those are just a few examples. And I'm sure if we all stop and think, we can think of things that we have taken out of our life that have bothered us. I can pretty much promise you, though, that many of you are not doing what God has called you to do because you're afraid of what people are going to think. That was me for quite a few years when I was called to be a youth pastor. I was worried about what my friends would think at the time. I was worried about what my parents would think. Because we were always taught growing up that, hey, you need money. And guess what? And to be honest, there's no money in it. That's what we were taught. And how can I take care of a family if I'm not making any money? But that's what the kind of thing is because you're worried about what people thought. So I became obsessed with what people think about me. And it's the quickest way that I found to forget what God thinks about me. And that's where some of you live. What are they going to think? What are they going to say? Surrendering to the opinions of others will draw you back onto the normal road that leads to destruction. Like I mentioned earlier, when I stopped going to the bar and quit drinking, and I started helping with the youth group back in Holton Lake and going back to church, I had the worry of what will my friends think. I had that worry of, well, are they going to be okay with it? Should I just keep going and pretending? That kind of stuff. And for a long time when I quit going, I was going strong for 5 years and no drinking. And then my wedding day happened. And one of my good friends came to my wedding and he bought me a shot. He wanted to share a drink with me to celebrate getting married. I wasn't drinking at the time, but instead of refusing and just saying, no, I don't want to drink or anything, I took the drink. Now I took a couple sips just because he was there to watch me. I didn't finish it. I didn't drink the whole thing. But for the next couple days afterwards, all I thought about was, why would I even do that? Why? There was no point. I didn't want it, but I just wanted to make him happy. So, you've got to deal with the inward need to please the fear of men. It's going to prove to be a trap, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept saved. Now that's a lot of what the inward pressure is. The need to please, but we also have to worry about the outward pressure. And it's one word. That's criticism. It's feeling the pressure from the outside. When the normal people on the broad road hurl insults at you for being on the narrow road. Hey, why are you doing that? Why are you going to church all the time? What are you going to prayer meetings for? Why do you go to Wednesday church? Why do you go to Sunday church? You're going to get, why are you going to serve the homeless? Why are you going to youth camp for an entire week? I got questions like that all the time. There's always going to be, when you go serve the homeless, you're going to get that question. There's always going to be poor people, so why waste your time? Why don't you just go to that movie with us? It's just a movie. Come on, we used to drink and do blank together. Why don't you come hang out more? You're going to get criticized. They might persecute you. They might make fun of you. But if they do, remember the words of what Jesus said in John 15:18 through 20. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, but you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. And if they had listened to me, they would listen to you. You got to get ready for it. It's just part of being different. It's part of being set apart. It's part of being holy. It's part of being pure. It's a part of leaving that normal road that everybody else is on that leads to destruction and getting on the narrow road that leads to life. Normal doesn't work, as we can see. Because if you want to be like normal, you want to end most of your marriages in divorce. You want to go and just not be happy with life. So that's why it's something that we should do something different. I will say, back when I started following Christ again, right when I turned my life around following him, I hated the criticism. It really bothered me. I wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be looked at weird. But now I think, you know what? Criticize away. I got called weird when I stopped drinking. My friends at the time said I abandoned them. I was now the church boy because, you know what? I quit going to the bar. I quit drinking. I didn't do any of that stuff anymore. So those friends at the time even deleted me off social media, and I lost contact with them. They still haven't talked to me. They just decided that, well, you know what? Since you go to church, we don't want you part of that life. And sometimes you're going to have to make those sacrifices. I will say, I play church softball with the church I used to go to in Grand Rapids. They called me to play with them because I played with them for a few years. And just a few weeks ago, we were at a game, and they were talking about going to the bar after the game and getting drinks. You know, just normal drinks. And when I said I don't drink, the looks I got, it was kind of funny. It made me laugh because I just don't drink anymore. And it was weird to them that, well, you're under your young 30s and you just don't drink. So sometimes you're going to be called weird. I mean, I find comfort in being called weird now because, you know what? I'd rather be weird and different. My wife even calls me weird, than to be like everybody else. And you're going to be called weird when you follow God. When you will leave that normal world, you're going to be on the narrow road and people criticize you for being weird. And I would say to you, don't worry when they criticize you for being weird. Worry when they don't. Because if they don't, chances are you're going to be way too close to that normal. If no one makes fun of you or the things you do for following Christ, you're just blending in and you're traveling with the crowd. Don't worry about getting called weird. That's the big thing. Just worry when they don't. And I don't want you to follow somebody else's different. I don't want you to have the same different as me. I don't want you to have the same different as somebody else you know, because God has a custom different for you. He's not just a cookie cutter. This is how everybody's going to be. Because there's multiple different ways you can do it. You could see God. He's going to lead you to do weird stuff. It may be to drive an old junk car because you're getting out of debt, or downsize your house because you just don't need all that stuff, or fast. You know, give up food or certain things for a long time because you have like a health or a mental issue you're dealing with. There's stuff like that. It could be, like it was for me, to take me out of that party scene and to stop me from drinking. And now I can go back into that situation and I don't have to worry about drinking or any of that because it doesn't affect me anymore. I am able to overcome that, and I am able to talk to those teens that are going through the same thing. Sometimes God puts you in places that you don't expect him to. And you know what? People look at you weird. I will say, we have our own Pastor Cello. He allows people into his house that are in need and lets them stay with him. And the first time I heard him say that, I went, that's a little weird. But then I started thinking, well, if he has the ability and God calls him to do that and be kind, maybe that's what he should do. Because that's what he was called to do. There's so many different things. So that's the thing. You may open your house and all that stuff. But when you follow God, and when you do, you're going to be persecuted. And when you are, remember 5:10 through 12, God blesses those who are persecuted. Matthew 5:10 through 12. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you, because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. So, if you're persecuted, if you're made fun of, rejoice. Praise God in heaven that you're doing something that draws attention from those who don't know Christ, or do know Christ, but not in a personal relationship. and being considered even in the same category of persecution for somebody that died for you, that's a pretty good honor. So I pray that people don't understand you. I pray that you are different. And remember this, you can live your whole life trying to please people, but you can't please everyone, no matter what you do. Every time you try to do that, someone will still not be happy. But you can please God. Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 2:4, "For we speak as messengers approved by God, to be entrusted with the good news. Our purpose is to please God, not people." Becoming obsessed with what people think about you is the quickest way to forget what God thinks about you. Fear of people will prove to be a trap or even a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. When you follow Christ, you will be different. If you truly follow him, you will be holy. You're going to be set apart, and you will be persecuted. God even said you're going to deal with trials and tribulations in this life. But don't worry about when you're persecuted. Worry when you're not. So, we're going to pray really quick. Father, we pray in the name of Jesus that your Spirit would direct us off the broad path that leads to destruction, and that way we would be different for your name's sake. That we remember to be holy and set apart because you are holy. Give us guidance and direction on what steps to take if we are struggling with either the inward or outward pressure. I pray that you give us strength to fight conforming to the world and realizing that it's okay to be different. I just thank you for everything you do for us, and I pray that you give us a good week.